Let's go back to what I was going to do before, which is lock out the stuff I didn't want. So I don't want the joints to translate, and I don't want them to scale. So right click, lock and hide selected. They are now no longer displayed. You cannot translate them, you cannot scale them, they're locked. For visibility, what I like to do is just simply make them non-keyable. That way you can still make them hidden, you can still have incoming connections. What really gets annoying is when the visibility gets keyed. First of all, normally that just generates extra data because the animator typically is not keying the visibility. The keyframe rig is just on or it's just off. They're not keying individual controls. Then they will do something like bake out all the animations, or key everything that's there. So you're wind up animation curves that are redundant and really aren't doing anything. The other thing is, then you turn it on and then you scrub through and then it turns back off again or something like that. It just really gets in the way. You still want to have the ability to turn the visibility on and off. You just don't want to key it. So that's what that does. Alright, so that's the FK for the most part. Now notice that that's going to be kind of hard to see as we have this dull blue color. We can't tell the left from the right or anything like that. And being that dull blue, it kind of goes into the background. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to override the color. If you select the top one and go to the transform, come over to drawing overrides, we're going to enable overrides. The only bad thing is that there's an index. So there's only so many colors Maya will give you. And some of them Maya wants to use. So what I tend to do is I set the left to red. And I'll set the right to green. Now why red and green? Actually, it's kind of arbitrary. It works for me. Again, Maya has only so many colors that you can choose, and some of those Maya actually likes to use itself. That really limits your palette, and so these colors tend to work well with that limited palette. But also, and this is a little silly, but it's an Old Navy thing. Red is port and green is starboard. Red's basically the left side of the ship, and green is the right side of the ship. What also works well is that I put the FK as a dull green and a dull red, and now as I set up the IK, I'm going to put that as a brighter version of the red and green, so it stands out much better. So I'm going to duplicate my little box again. I'm just going to snap that to the ankle. Now there's two schools of thought about setting up your IK control. One is to put it at the ankle, the other is to put it at the ball of the foot. It's kind of 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. Basically, if you put it at the ankle, it makes certain movements very easy to do. And if you put it at the ball, it's going to make a different set of movements easy to do. You're not going to have both at the same time. You can't. Well, I shouldn't say you can't, but a single control can't be in two places at once unless you do something really, really funky. Jason Sluffer actually created a script where you can animate the pivot, and you can do it that way. That's one way to do it. But you have to really do some tricks to make one object snap to two different pivot points in order to work that way. I like keeping things very simple and very repeatable. So I think it's a clever solution, but I don't particularly like using it because of some other issues. But then again, my background is more of games rigging than film. In film, you're just worried about getting the shot. In games, you're worried about being able to reproduce that shot over and over and over again, to be able to transfer it from character to character, to be able to match pose from one animation to the other, because everything is based on clips. So it's just a different style than I'm used to rigging for. That style has certain limitations that I still work under as habit. Isn't that really a bad thing or a good thing? It's just you need to be aware that what works for one person may not necessarily work for another, or just because somebody does something that doesn't match the way I do it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that it is different, and that different may be for a reason, may not be, I don't know. So these feet are bowed out slightly, so I'm going to just kind of rotate that so it lines up. I don't want to snap the rotations because I only want to rotate it in the one axis. And again, you get the idea. Doesn't have to be perfect. I like having the IKs kind of like these big boots over the FKs. It's really functionality. It doesn't make a difference. It can be a locator for all Maya cares. It's really just trying to find that balance of making everything visually representative. You don't want to have to go, ideally, you don't want to have to go to like a character UI to try to pick your control or some other fancy custom script. You want to be able to just look at the scene and grab it. And if you can't look in the scene and grab it, then you may want to think about redesigning the way your rig is looking. Okay. And so we will call this IK control. And this will be the, and again I'm using right for right and left for left. You can use like L underscore if you want to or something like that. I just prefer left and right. It's kind of hard to get them confused. And again I'm going to zero node these, both of them. Boom, that's done. And I'm going to lock off the scale because I don't need that. I'm going to make this non-keyable. And now I'm going to overwrite the color. One thing to note, you can do it in the shape node or the transform node. When I came up here, I set it to the shape node. The reason why is because as children, they will all inherit the same color, so it allows me just to set it once. If I did it on the shape node, this shape node isn't a child of that shape node. So I would have to set each one individually. But what that does allow you to do is, let's say for example, we want this one to be a different color. We could actually do that. Actually, I did that on the transform node. So let me do it on the shape node. Illustrate the point. There we go. So now we have this middle joint in a different color because we're overriding the shape node, not the transform. And now I can just as easily disable that. And that's just manipulating hierarchies. So we'll go back to this transform and display, drawing overrides, and now I'm going to set this to a brighter red. So now we have a visual representation of the IK versus the FK. And then same for the green. It may look a little too much like the selected green color. Let's try. That is the selected green color. Knew it was one of those. There we go. So now our IK is brighter. And so we have a clearer image of which is our FK controls and which is our IK controls, which are the left and which are the right. So now let's apply an IK handle to that. There are three basic types of IK handles in Maya. There's more, but there's three basic ones. You have your RP handle, your SC handle, and then your spline IK handle. An SC handle is a single chain. What makes that unique is that it gets its rotation from the rotation of the IK handle. An RP handle is a rotation plane solver, and what that means is that traditionally it takes 3 points to designate a plane. There's the first point of our rotation plane, and that's the second point. So where's that third point? The third point is designated by this. It's called the pole vector. So I have that IK handle here. So up here at the top is what's called the rotation disk. And that arrow sticking forward is the direction of the pole vector. That represents our third point. It's along this vector and at some point along that line, arbitrary in space. Okay? So if you draw a line from here along that arrow, say to out here, third point. First point, second point, third point. Now what happens is when you change that pole vector, this top joint is going to rotate. So what we want to do is we want to create a control to show where this pole vector is aiming to, and that's basically going to be a knee control kind of thing. And I'll illustrate that here in a minute. So before we do that, I need to have a new controller shape, because a box really isn't going to be all that great. We could use a box if we wanted to, but that would kind of suck. So go back to snapping. Okay, so now I got an arrow. I'm going to pull that over to the side. And I haven't done the right leg yet, so I'm just going to do one right now. Control that. I'm going to snap it here to the knee and pull it out. So now if I select that and select the IK handle, constrain, pole vector. Now if you select here, you'll see that we have a slight rotation now of 0.068 degrees. Why is that? Because when we put that at the knee and pulled it straight out, it was not perfectly aligned with that arrow we saw. It's off just a little bit. What I usually do is it's just a little bit of trial and error of just scooting that over. Like right now, and translate it 7.75, put it to 7.4. And we see that that number shrunk. And I'll just keep walking it down until I get that as close to 0 as possible. And actually I've gone just a tad too far because now it's +1. And really, even if I get this, you can change your precision. Here, settings, change precision. Like right now it's throwing 3 decimal places. You can pop that up to 6, 8, whatever. Like if you put it to 8, you'll see that, you know, there's all kinds of numbers off of there. Just as a general rule, if I can get it pretty much at 0 or 0.001, that's generally close enough for me. You want it as close to 0 as possible, but 0.001 degrees, the human eye is not going to be able to see that. So right now we're showing a -0 rotation. How do you get -0 rotation? Technically you don't. If you come back up to your precision settings, let's again crank that up to 8. You'll see it's really a negative number that's just really small. 0.0003. That's good enough. If you can get it to -0, which is actually a number small enough that it's negative but it's below your level of precision, that's generally good enough. If that number is too big, when you switch from IK to FK, you will see a pop, and it will be noticeable, and your animators will complain vehemently. But 0.001, it's too small for them to see. And I'm going to quickly name our IK handle here. You should have everything named. So you can see how that's all in blue now because it's got the constraint coming in. So we'll call that leg IK handle. Alright, so we need another IK handle to go from here to here. Now this time I am going to use an SC handle. So set that to SC. Because this is a single chain and it doesn't have to have that pole vector to control its orientation. And we'll name that left ankle IK handle. Okay, so we got one more to do. The reason why I'm going to use an RP handle for this last bit, because intuitively you would think that that's what an SC handle is for. However, what is going to happen is I'm going to place a constraint on it. The constraint and the SC handle is going to fight each other, and then it's going to constantly have to be refreshed. If you put an RP handle and then give it a pole vector constraint, that forces the IK handle to behave.